Eastern Washington out there with the town that's named after you.
Yeah, we're shivering tonight.
That's what I hear. Oh, gosh. Okay, thanks again,
Okay.
Peter.
Yeah, thank you. Good night.
Oh, man, yeah. Oh, Peter Davenport is saying that it's in the 20s out there in Eastern Washington today at Davenport, Washington, where he lives. So it is coming of winter, that's for sure. Out here in the Seattle area, it is getting down into the 30s at night, and there's frost all over the ground and on the roofs of the houses, so it's getting close. But let's jump on the next guest here and have Vince Inzunza come back on and see if we can talk with Vince about what the heck is going on in the weird and wonderful here since last week. Vince, are you there?
I'm right here, Michael. How you doing?
Oh, wonderful, buddy. Yeah, how have you been? You just do not rest. You are always on the go. And tell us what's going on since last week.
Okay, well, currently I am reporting to you from the Brotherhood Lounge in Olympia, Washington. It's one of my favorite dive bars in the area, and I just stopped here for a beer after a huge day of research down in Lewis County for a few episodes that I'm working on.
Oh, for Pacific North Weird, in other words, right?
Yeah. We got one kind of major project we're working on, which I'd like to share a bit with you.
Wonderful.
So recently, we were given 3 cassette tapes, homemade interviews from the early 80s with a man named Rant Mullins. And Rant Mullins is was a Washington native, born in 1897, died in the mid-'80s. And he is purported to be the world's first Bigfoot hoaxer.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, his claim is that in 1930, in the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest of Washington State, he and some friends noticed some huckleberry pickers had camped up in the forest, and Rant worked for the Forest Service at the time. And he decided, based on the native legends that he knew of the Sasquatch, to carve out these 2 huge wooden shoes and had his friend make some tracks around this huckleberry campsite. Apparently scared the heck out of these huckleberry pickers, and it was just like a fun joke at the time, you know. But this story gets even weirder because decades later, this man named Ray Wallace supposedly steals the feet from him and goes on a hoaxing spree across Washington, Oregon, and Northern California. And Ray went to the papers to claim that he himself invented the myth of Bigfoot. So that, of course, angers Rant Mullins, and he goes to the papers and say, hey, no, it was me who did it 30 years before. So it's just this wonderful, weird tale of like 2 hoaxers warring against each other. And it's just kind of like, that's the type of story I like to tell with Pacific North Weird, you know. So the fact that we got a hold of these tapes, which are the only known interview audio recordings of this man, and that we get to tell his story and release it to the world for the first time, is really exciting to me.
Wow. So when you're listening to these, I'm assuming they're audio tapes, right?
Yes.
When you're listening to these audio tapes, what does the gentleman sound like? First of all, what was his age at the time, and was he educated? And how did he come up with the idea of trying to hoax the Bigfoot footprints?
Okay, well, the idea came from him just having a natural knowledge of the native lore of the area. So, like 1930, this was like a good 30-some years before Bigfoot was even a word. You know, it was Sasquatch or some derivative of it at that point. And that's kind of where he got the idea from it. He was born and died in a little town called Toledo, Washington. No real formal education other than what was required of him before he went out, to get jobs in the mining and logging industries. What's interesting about these cassette tapes is at the time of the recording, he was in his early 80s, and the man is almost unintelligible. Like, he is very hard to understand. So, like, I have put in about 20 man-hours into carefully transcribing every word he says in this 13-minute segment within the 3 hours of tapes where he actually talks about the Bigfoot thing. And I've been doing work with the Lewis County Historical Museum. I have been purchasing maps, looking at topography maps from the 1920s of Lewis and Skamania counties. I have been looking at genealogy records just to kind of like make sure I understand what he's saying. And It's been quite an interesting research project. I'd say at this point I am about 85% finished with the transcription process. There's still a few mystery spots where it's really, really difficult to understand what he's saying. Combination of really bad recording quality and the fact that he's very mush-mouthed. Like he's very doesn't have like really great diction.
Yeah,
you know,
well,
like slurs the words together and everything.
Well, Vince, you are really going to add to the historical character of this whole Bigfoot encrypted area of the paranormal if you can actually transcribe the rest of that and get it out there, because obviously this gentleman had some kind of knowledge of the local lore even back then to even want to hoax this. So I can't wait to hear that and read his transcript.
Yeah, it's one of the most exciting things that has kind of happened and landed in our laps. And I have to give like a special shout out to the Lewis County Historic Museum. They're the ones who received the cassette tapes. The director there, I'm his go-to guy when it comes to them receiving, paranormal historic artifacts. So like I'm the first guy he called up, and I went and transferred the tapes to digital, and me and my cohort, Tyler Bounds, sat and listened to a whole 3 hours of it. And at one point, we weren't even sure if he was going to bring up Bigfoot. But then in the last 15 minutes of the last cassette, the interviewer woman says, "Hey, Rand, maybe we should talk about Bigfoot now." And then it's all gold from that. But
oh man, I can just see you and Tyler sitting in some bar somewhere, listening to these tapes for the first time, and then running across this, golden knowledge of this guy from the 1930s about hoaxing Bigfoot. That has got to be a great scene that you got to add to the night, to the actual broadcast if you ever do it that way.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we knew prior that Rant Mullins was a purported Bigfoot hoaxer. So, like, we were definitely listening to these tapes in anticipation that he'd bring up the Bigfoot story, Like you can Google Rant Mullins and Ray Wallace, and you'll find articles about their feud. You can find basically Rant's story throughout there. But, like, kind of what makes these tapes special is that you can't find this man's voice. You can't find this man actually telling the story himself up there. So, like, this is pretty a once in a lifetime little discovery,
Oh, definitely. Yeah, it's like
very excited about it.
It's like discovering a recording from D.B. Cooper somewhere, for the very first time. That sounds fascinating.
Oh,
stuff.
Absolutely, yeah.
Now, Vince, why don't you tell everybody about where they can go to find these things in the future and to check up on Pacific North Weird if they want to find out more about you and your show.
Sure. Well, you can find Pacific North Weird on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And if you want to check out our videos, you can go to pacificnorthweird.com. That directs you right to our YouTube page. Just this past week, we released a brand new video. We've been on a bit of a hiatus in terms of video production, but I'm proud to say we're back and ready to make the world weird again. There's a video called The 7 Weirdest Homes of the Portland Area. That would be Portland, Oregon. And earlier this year, I went out and took the Weird Homes Tour, Portland edition, and did a segment on the 7 weirdest homes of that area. There's a man who lives in a retired Boeing 727 jet in the middle of the woods.
I saw that.
There's a woman who owns a house full of vintage devil figurines. I mean, just some of the most delightfully strange and eclectic people out there. And yeah, we produced a really high-quality episode just on those homes. And yeah, I'd really appreciate, anyone who's interested in that, go to our site, check out that video, check out our previous videos. We have a lot out there.
Well, Vince from Pacific North Weird, thank you very much, buddy, for coming on and giving us another update report on the weird and wonderful that you keep digging up week after week for us here on Night Dreams Talk Radio. So thank you again, and you have a wonderful time at the rest of the night there at the bar.
Yeah, you too, Michael. And yeah, I just want to give a shout out to Olav too, because he's your guest and he's a cool guy, and he's bound to make a really compelling guest this hour.
Well, I'm looking forward to that, buddy. So, yeah, thanks again, and we will talk to you hopefully next week.
Absolutely. You have a good night.
All right. Well, that was Vince Nzunza, ladies and gentlemen. Don't ask me how to spell that, by the way. Nzunza is a Basque name, so it is spelled very interestingly. But Vince is a great guy and runs Pacific North Weird on the Internet, and you can check out all the strange and wonderful things that he comes across and reports on a weekly basis here on Night Dreams Talk Radio. So now we are going to jump into our main guest and see if we can get Olav-Phillips on the line, and we're going to talk with Olav for the rest of the remainder of the hour about some real interesting stuff. So I know Vince is probably listening. Olav, are you there now?
I am here.
Oh, wonderful, guy. Now speak closely into that microphone and as loud as you can, just to make sure we get you, every syllable in there. So how are you tonight, Olav?
I'm doing pretty good, and big shout out to Vince. I'm a huge fan of Pacific North Weird. I've been watching Pacific North Weird for quite some time.
Oh, so, yeah. No, I know you guys.
He's a great guy.
I know you guys are buddies, and it's kind of fun to get you guys on the show and let each of you hear about the antics and the things that you guys are both doing up to this point. So why don't you do us? Shenanigans. There you go. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Olav, and how you kind of got into this whole paranormal thing to begin with?
Sure. Well, I am the publisher and one of the writers for Paranoia Magazine. I've been researching UFOs and unknown aerial phenomenon since I was a kid, and I can get into that if you want to understand the genesis of it. But yeah, I mean, I've just been obsessed with Fortean stuff in general, cryptids, Bigfoot, and other things, and UFOs and ghosts and the whole 9 yards. I've been as long as I can remember. So,
well, why don't you start from the beginning? Tell us a little bit about Paranoia Magazine.
Well, Paranoia is the oldest. Well, it's at least one of the oldest, but I believe it is the oldest conspiracy magazine still in publication. And so, every quarter, we're quarterly. Every quarter we put out a magazine. We're currently working on our winter issue. And, we try to get some weird stuff and interesting stuff and conspiratorial stuff that people would be interested in. Our last issue, which was the fall issue, we had a great article by Walter Bosley on the arrows, the mysterious airships seen in the late 1800s. He's found a link between the arrows and the bell. If you're familiar with their Glocke, the Nazi bell.
Of course. Now, what kind of a link did he find on that? That's fascinating.
Well, basically, Walter has been very interested in the Sonora Aero Club for quite some time. And he fairly regularly pores through these bizarre collage art pieces that were done by a guy named Delshow. And Delshow had worked with the Sonora Aero Club. And they're basically collage schematics of the arrows. And in one of them, he actually found where it showed the power source of the arrow something that looks exactly like the bell. And it even has arrows indicating the counter-rotating nature of the bell.